It was the beginning of December 2020, and our time in Stuart was coming to an end. Steve finished his classes at Chapman, and we got ready for our first big trip. Or so we thought. Hello everybody, happy December. We are coming to you sort of live from Stuart, Florida in our beautiful marina. And we were going to head south to Lake Worth or Fort Lauderdale and head to the Bahamas. Steve?
And we're not doing that. We're actually going to sell the boat, move
No.
back into the van.
No, that's definitely not
Bella
happening.
doesn't like that. We're just going to hang out in the good old US of A. So we're going to head south to the Keys and play around maybe a month and see when it gets a little nicer for us to try to cross to the Bahamas. So we just think for now it'll be a good idea for us to stick in US waters and go play in the Keys, which we haven't played in yet. So we're actually pretty excited for that.
And with that, we put our vehicle in storage, stocked up the boat with provisions, and spent our last night, December 11th, in Stuart. Or so we thought. We were supposed to leave today. We have 20 to 30 knot winds. It's crazy out there. Like, we were not expecting this. So we were paying attention to predict wind mostly, and it showed calm seas. Those aren't calm seas. So the wind tomorrow morning when we set sail is this many knots, and so hopefully that is better for us than today would have been. We were going to leave a couple hours ago. We're not leaving until tomorrow, and hopefully the wind dies down a lot. We're glad we waited. The next morning was calm and we were ready to set sail, including Bella, who was dressed for the Browns game that day. Pulling into or leaving a dock can be stressful, especially for new liveaboards. Usually, you're going to have a couple of factors that will affect your entrance or exit. Wind, current, tides, bad weather, blinding sunlight, and other boats are all things we've had to deal with when at dock. Luckily today, not many of those were factors for us. So after a family meeting about how to leave the dock, we each took our places and helped Steve pilot an uneventful exit. Once we get rolling, one of us has the job of cleaning off the deck. This includes clearing all dock lines, storing fenders, and making sure the sails are ready. We have also learned our lesson on having any hatches open during sailing in higher waves and wind, so most of the time we close those as well. Conditions were perfect that morning with seas 2 feet every 3 seconds, so we headed out into the Great Big Blue in order to get to our first stop of Lake Worth quicker. This attempt out of the St. Lucie Inlet was much easier than the first time we tried to sail out a few weeks back, so we were happy about that. Sadly, the winds were only 5 to 7 knots on the nose, so we couldn't put the sails up. Sailing is all about true and apparent wind. True wind is the wind that you feel in your face when standing still, like when the boat was at anchor. Apparent wind is a combination of the airflow we feel from the boat's motion plus the airflow from the true wind. For more information about true versus apparent wind, check out this article online.
Rock with the music, just rock. Or stay with the music and sway. Jump with the music and jump. Rock with the music, just rock. Dance with the music and dance.
After the 30-mile sail, we approached the Lake Worth or Palm Beach Inlet, which was quite an interesting one. The channel was fairly narrow to our standards, and it made it feel like it was even smaller with large cargo ships and fancy yachts going in and out. We had left Stuart around 9 a.m. and arrived at Lake Worth around 2 p.m. So right away we found a decent anchorage site among many other boats. We dropped anchor and celebrated the first leg of our Keys trip. Bella was happy with it as well, and this marked only our 6th time ever anchoring. The next morning we left early, hoping to avoid lots of boat traffic, but sometimes the mornings are the busiest because the fishing boats want to get out early, and so do the yachts. We had a bit of a race with one in particular, but even with the pilot boat leading them, they were moving faster than us. We gave way and waited for them to clear the channel before we headed out. Finally, off we went out the inlet and into the ocean to make good time and not worry about bridges. It was great conditions again. Seas were 2 feet every 2 to 3 seconds, and great wind at 16 knots, but on the nose again, so no sails. Our next stop was Boca Raton, and it took us about 7 hours total, anchor to anchor. The tricky thing about the Boca Inlet is that it is really narrow, really shallow in places, and also very busy, but mostly with small vessels, no cargo ships or huge yachts, thank goodness. The other caveat is that it is hard to navigate when there is a strong current. So we decided to skip this inlet and head farther south to the Hillsborough Inlet to work our way north in the ICW until we reached Lake Boca. Luckily, we timed the bridges right and got to the anchorage fairly quickly. It was a narrow channel, but cool to see all the fancy houses along the way. That was a quick stop, but we did get to snorkel, check the anchor, enjoyed a nice dinner, and a restful sleep. In the morning, we fought a bit of incoming current, but at least the Lake Boca Bridge opens on demand so that we had no trouble getting out. The incoming tide fought us, but it was worth it because when we got to the ocean, it was like glass. It was a beautiful morning on the water, but you guessed it, no sails again. The route today was a bit longer, an 8-hour trek to Miami, and with the wind on the nose, we couldn't sail, so we decided to focus on fishing instead. Steve was able to catch a bonito, and our unlucky fishing streak finally ended. The Port of Miami is a very busy place, so we started seeing really big boats such as cargo ships, huge yachts, and even a sleeping cruise liner. We actually got to see the new crew come from land to get on the cruise ship. Even though cruise ships aren't active right now because of COVID, they still need to take care of the ship, and that's exactly what this crew is doing. We also spotted an amazing and the world's largest sloop sailboat called M5. She is 246 feet long, has a crew of 14, and can hold 12 guests, as well as has 2 pools, a gymnasium, and a sauna. This wouldn't be the last we'd see of Mirabella 5. It had been a wonderful 8-hour trip, and we really enjoyed the calm seas all day. After all of our gawking at these ginormous boats, it was now abundantly clear that we were approaching Miami. Our plan was to steer clear of the inlet and head south of Miami to check out Marine Stadium or even No Name Harbor as an anchorage. But we opted for Dinner Key instead because of its easy access to shore, trash, grocery stores, and more. Soon after we passed Miami, the water started to change color to a beautiful light blue-green. This was the first time we'd seen a different watercolor besides brown from the ICW, or the dark blue of the ocean. When you head to this area, you are passing through Biscayne Bay, which is home to the Biscayne National Park. At the very entrance to the bay from the ocean, you'll notice lots of houses on stilts through the Biscayne Channel. This is known as Stiltsville. Dating back to the 1930s, and with a colorful history of illegal alcohol and gambling, it's a really cool sight to see, and there are not many of them left after general wear and tear, fires, but also hurricane damage. The bay can be rather shallow in places, so be sure to pay attention when entering. We shot straight across the northern tip of the bay to get to Dinner Key. Here we found a decent anchor spot, albeit around numerous boats, both occupied as well as not occupied, or even worse, derelict or sunken. Immediately we got snorkel gear on to get in the water. Steve checked on the anchor while Cody and I checked out our new underwater backyard. Later that evening, we enjoyed a beautiful sunset as well as a calm night. The next morning, Steve jumped on the paddleboard to enjoy the glass-like water and was greeted by manatees. This was our very first sighting of these beautiful creatures, and it was so cool to see them near the boat. Later that day, we hopped in the dinghy and went to shore. This was the first time off the boat in 4 days, so we were ready to stretch our legs. Luckily, Miami and the Coconut Grove area have a citywide free trolley, so we hopped aboard and headed into downtown Miami to check it out, all while being physically distant and wearing masks, of course. We spent a total of 3 nights at Dinner Key, and then when the wind was right, we hoisted the sails and headed south to the Keys. The wind was in our favor that day, coming from the west, so we got both the jib and the mainsail up for a faster trip to our next anchor spot for the night, Sands Key. When we got to the anchorage, we had just enough time for a quick dip, dinner, and then bed. When we have more free time, we'd like to explore the national park. It has some really great things to do, like snorkeling, camping, fishing, and kayaking. We stayed just that one night at Sands Key and took off in the morning for Key Largo. Stay tuned for part 2 of our 4-part series detailing our sailing adventures in the Florida Keys.
Are you ready for the Titanic scene? Just brace kind of at an angle like this.
Titanic scene! Awesome.